Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Holland, and today I'm going to be talking about variability. And variability is pretty much talking about how spread out is your data. If it's spread out far, then you may not have very good results when you try to take the mean. It gives you an idea of how close together the numbers are and how good your center of measure is. Here I've got some data and it's plotted on a number line, and I'm just going to write out what the data is. I have an 11 and 13 and 13, and then I've got three 15s, and then I have a 19, a 23, and a 23, and a 25. So there's my data written out. And if I want to look at my center, my mode is pretty easy. The one that has 3 right there would be my mode, so that's going to be 15. So 15 is going to be my mode. My median, I would have to go center, so I can just start counting backwards. I can just go like this until I get to the middle. Let's see, and then I get those 2 right here. So this right here would be the median. So 15 is also the median. So the mode and the median are the exact same thing. And then my mean is going to be where I have to add all of these numbers together and divide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've already pre-added it, and I got 120 divided by 10. So my mean is going to be a 12. So those are my centers of my measures of center. And now I'm going to be talking about the variability. So now that I know the center, I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to figure out what my variability is. So one easy way is just to look at the range, and that's when you take the max number minus the minimum number. That's pretty easy. So the maximum number here was a 25. The minimum number was an 11. So my range ends up being a 14. So my range here is a 14. So range is an easy one to do. You just take the maximum number minus the minimum number, and that'll give you your range. Okay, another way to look at variability is to look at, on page 441, they talk about quartiles. And quartiles are like quarters, right? It sounds like the word quarter. And so it's like dividing the median is where you divide your data in half. Well, then you take each half and divide those in half. And so let me go ahead and write out again the numbers that I have. Let's see if I can put them all on the same line, which I may not be able to do. Okay, well, I kind of do. I don't know if it all fits on there. Let me try to move this 11 over a little bit. All right, so there is all my data pretty much online right there. And let's just look at the middle. We already knew that if I found the median, it would be right here. So it's right here in the center is my median right there. And then I'm going to look at each half and divide this in half. So in this case right here, I'm going to do the same thing. This right here is my first quartile, and do the same thing over here. And this is my second quartile. So I would consider this I call this my Q1, or my first quartile, and that's going to be a 13. And this would be my third quartile, Q3, and we call that my third quartile, and that ends up being a 23. So I have my range, my interquartile range. So we're talking about this right here. I'm trying to find out what is the range of the middle of the data right there. And so the interquartile range, and I like to abbreviate that because I don't like writing interquartile range. So I end up abbreviating that IQR. And that's just going to be these 2 numbers subtracted. So it's just going to be the Q3 minus my Q1, which in this case is going to be 23 minus 13, which is a 10. Now remember, my range that I had before was a 14. So my range was a 14, but my interquartile range is a 10. And that gives me a little bit better understanding as to as to the data, and the majority of the numbers fall within 10 numbers is what they're saying. So the majority of the numbers are going to fall within those 10 numbers. The middle set half of the data is going to fall in those numbers right there. Let's look at another example here. And in this example, I'm going to make it easier just so that you can see it easily. I'm going to come up with some numbers. I've got a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 20. So I've got kind of a range of numbers right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 20. And let's just come up with some of the things we do know. So I know my median is going to be right there in the center, right? So it's going to be a 3. Mode, I don't have a mode this time. So I'm going to put a 0 with an X through it because there is no mode. Nothing is repeated. My mean is going to equal to, let's see, that's 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's going to be 30 divided by 5. So my mean is a 6. Because I have 5 numbers right there. So my median's 3 and my mean is 6 right there. But let's talk about the variability now. So the variability, the easiest one, of course, is the range. My range is going to equal to the largest number minus the smallest number. So it's a range of 19, which seems rather large. And then when I try to do the interquartile numbers, so here's my center. This is my median right here, my median. And when I look at this right here, my Q1 is going to be in between the 1 and the 2. So my Q1 is a 1.5. My Q3 is in between a 4 and a 20. So to find out what that is, I'm going to add those two together. I get a 24 and then divide that by 2. So my interquartile Q3 is a 12. So I've got a 1.5 and a 12. And so my interquartile range then is going to equal to 12 minus 1.5, which is a 10.5. It'll be a 10.5. So that's kind of a large range for such small numbers in the beginning. That interquartile range is pretty big. Remember my range, just my plain range, was a 19. That equal to a 19. So it looks like there's a lot of variation here with my data. And let's talk about something called an outlier. I kind of brought it up last time, but there's a way to actually calculate what is an outlier. And what you're going to do is you're going to multiply your interquartile range by 1.5. So I've got a 10.5, and I'm going to multiply that by 1.5. So 10.5 times 1.5, and that gives me 15.75. 15.75. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Q1, whatever my Q1 is, and I'm going to subtract from it this number right here that I've just calculated. And I end up getting a negative number. So I get like a negative 14.25, I believe, 14.25. So I end up getting a pretty large number there. And it's very negative. So this part right here, my Q3 is a 12, and I'm going to add to it the 15.75. So I'm going to add that together, and I end up getting 27.75. Then what I do is I compare my smallest number and my largest number to these ranges right here. And in this case, the 1 is greater than the negative 14.25, so that's good. And then my largest number is at 20, and that is less than the 27.75. So believe it or not, that 20 is not an outlier because it falls within the range of 1.5 times what the range is. So I can keep all my data because it's all good. Let me show you an example of when that would not be good. if I had numbers of 1, 1, 2, 2, and 100. So let's look at those right there. So again, my median is going to be a 2. My interquartile Q1 is going to be a 1. This is a 2, medium. My Q3, add those two together and divide by 2. That's 102 divided by 2, and that's going to give me a 51. So I get a 51 there. And then I'm going to take the interquartile range, which is 51 minus 1, which is a 50. And then I'm going to multiply that 50 times 1.5. And I end up getting 75. So then I'm going to take that number and either subtract it from the Q1 or add it to the Q2. So for Q1, it's going to be 1 minus 75, so that would be a negative 74. For Q3, it is 51 plus 75, which gives me a 126. Then I'm going to compare my data. Look at my data right now. So my lowest number I have is a 1. The 1 is greater than the negative 74, so that checks out okay. But then I look at my greater number. I have 100, and it doesn't work out. But and 100 is still, I was hoping that'd be greater, but 100 is still less than that 126, so that's still within range. So none of these are outliers at this point.